Yes, motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay.
Okay, moved Dan Harrison, second Brian Solacey, roll call vote. Ann Harrison,
Yes.
Brian Solacey.
Yes.
John Round.
Yes.
Kathy Bellata.
Yes.
Becky Jake says yes.
Thank you very
Good to
much.
go. Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You as well. Okay, there's that. All right, next up, we have the update on cell signaling technology project and the possible MassWorks grant application. Peter,
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, to stay right here.
wherever you'd like.
Great, thank you. Peter Gordeau, I'm from Hamilton, and I'm here representing cell signaling technology, but also really in collaboration with your DPW and Chuck. He and I have been talking a lot in recent weeks. And Chuck, I don't know whether, I assume you can talk, but if you want to, anytime you want to jump in, or if you want this to be your presentation, feel free.
No, you can take it away, but I am here and happy to answer any other questions or add on if I think it needed.
Greg, are you able to put the slides up that I shared?
I'll get there in a minute, I hope.
And I saw you have Charlie's on.
And Charlie Weir from Hancock Associates, our project engineer, is here as well. Thank you. Yes.
Remember him well. From planning board days. All right,
So
Hopefully
well,
they're good memories.
ways.
I assume that the board is familiar with what cell signaling has proposed for the property behind the Manchester Athletic Club. As you know, and as I'm sure you know, that in order to develop the lab space, CST will need access to both water and sewer. And we've had a long running discussion with Greg and with Chuck on those fronts. And I think we're all comfortable that they're obtainable. We do have to make some improvements. There is an existing water line that connects the site to municipal water. It's not big enough to meet CST's needs, and there is not currently sewer to the site, so we would need to connect that. And this project has continually grown in terms of its cost, and in looking at ways where we believe that the MassWorks grant is perfect for this application. MassWorks is all about both housing, but also economic development. This project is going to enable cell signaling to grow, up to 500 jobs here in Cape Ann, and invest, probably somewhere between 150 and $200 million in the first phase of its development. So it's a significant economic driver. And in conversations with some elected folks and other folks from EOHED, we believe that there is support for the use of a MassWorks grant to bring the water and sewer from their terminus on Forest Street to the site. Okay, so Greg, do you want to go to, with that said, do you want to go to the second slide?
Keep going, or?
Yes, to the next slide, please. So this is the proposed water line. It may be a 12-inch line. We haven't finished those calculations. Would extend from, would go under 128 through an existing culvert. It would go down Mill to Forest and would continue the intersection of Ancient County Way, where it would meet the town's most recent, or some of the town's most recent water line upgrades. That's just shy of a mile, about 4,700 lineal feet. Next slide, please.
Real quick, Peter, I'll just add that connection, the next from where we ended that project 2 years ago on Ancient County Way and going up to Harold Street was actually part of that project. We just didn't have the municipal funds to keep going. So we did it as an ad alternate and just didn't award that alternate. So this is something that we had designed already that we were hoping to construct, and with or without CST, we were probably going to do it at some point in the next few years. So it just kind of puts it kind of back at the forefront. The rest of it was not something we had considered, in the short term, but obviously, that's where we're at now.
Before we go on, are these slides either on the town website, or will they be available for?
Greg, I got them to Greg at 6 o'clock tonight, so they can be available to you.
Okay, I just think that it would be good for people to be able to see these.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
The sewer extension is not quite as far. It comes the same route under 128 and extends to approximately the intersection of Forest and Colburn, where it would meet I believe your gravity system. This would be a force main. There would be a lift station on the CST property, on the far side of 128. We would be connecting all of the abutters along Mill and Forest to the water line. We would leave accommodations for homeowners to connect to the force main in the future, should they
Mhm.
choose to do so. It's also possible that there may be opportunities to connect other abutting properties around CST. There are 2 or 3 commercial properties on our side. I think that we have to size the lift station and do things like that. I think we will make some assumptions about the known existing uses, and probably leave some additional capacity so that we can accommodate some uses going forward. Next slide, please, Greg. So the reason we're here is that Chuck and I would like to submit, or Chuck, Greg and I would like to submit an expression of interest to the state for this MassWorks grant. And that our schedule is, that expression of interest is due in mid-March on the 17th. We would then proceed with the preliminary design. We need to get it to a 25% level. We Hancock Associates would be doing that design on behalf of, sort of for the town. Our formal application is due in early June, 2nd of June. MassWorks then takes 5 or 6 months to figure out who they're going to award the money to. So we'd be notified in October, November, and they encourage you or expect you to start in the next construction season. So we would hopefully be commencing this work after completing the design, after going out to bid, and this would be your DPW taking it out to bid and overseeing the work. And so we would hope to be installing this, through the summer of 24.
Wow. Fast.
And next slide, please, Greg. Just to put that in perspective, this is a schedule that we shared with the planning board a week or so ago. And what this shows is that we expect to be doing design and permitting into 2024. But we hope to also begin some site work on the site in early 2024 with the completion of this first phase, which is approximately 125,000 square feet of lab, in early 2026. And the last slide is just in case you have not seen the site plan, this is the preliminary site plan that was presented to the planning board. There were numerous other slides, but you can see the 2 yellow buildings are phases 1 and 2. They total approximately 260,000 square feet. The yellow building on the right is phase 1, the left is phase 2. And you can see 2 purple garage boxes there. That is 2 phases of a garage with a total of approximately 475 spaces total, split relatively evenly between the 2 phases. So just to give you a gist of what the project's about. Chuck or Charlie, what did I miss?
I just have one thing to mention, which is, I'm sure people are already asking the question in their minds, but the CWMP, so the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan that the town put together in 2016, did have a set aside flow for the entire limited commercial district, which includes the CST property, but also the abutting properties, as Peter was talking about. And so that set aside flow based on the CWMP was around 30,000 gallons a day. And then the full build out was somewhere in the 60,000 gallons per day range. And I don't think Charlie has sized this yet or, run all the numbers, but the preliminary numbers that I have in my head were that there was something less than 20,000 gallons was the capacity that CST was going to be looking for. So, this follows the CWMP that, we kind of have on the books, and we should be, kind of making sure we're not going too far out of the way of what that's laying out. And I think this kind of is within the parameters that were set in that document.
I mean, yeah, I agree with the numbers that Chuck just mentioned.
Any questions from the board? John?
Yeah, a question. Is this the plan regardless of whether Mass Works comes through with money or not, or does that change?
Well, I think I can say this is the plan regardless, but because Self Signaling's already bought the land and they're gonna continue with this project, but we certainly, so, yes.
Okay, and I guess a corollary to that might be, I know that we've had some Mass Works grants here in town. Much of that is kind of like a matching funds sort of thing. Is there any amount of money that they might award, or is there kind of a rule of thumb? I don't know.
So most of the MassWorks grants that I've seen have been in the, the bigger ones have been in the $3 million range. I recently was speaking with a consultant who spends her life helping people get MassWorks grants. She felt for this project that it was possible that we might, that they might support a bigger grant. In the $5 million range, that we're going to go for as much as we can get. This is obviously a very significant investment by a local company that,
What's kind of the general cost of this as you look at it, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mention that. It is in here. We think that this work is $5 to $6 million.
Okay, so Mass Works is half, or well, you hope certainly.
We certainly hope it's half. We'd like it to be more. I should say that the MassWorks application makes it very clear that they look more favorably when multiple parties have skin in the game. Some commitment by the town. Chuck and I have talked. He doesn't have money in his current year budget, but for the town to make some commitment. And one of the ideas that Chuck and I have kicked around is that if the town would like the opportunity to connect what is currently the Black Earth compost site in the future, perhaps the town might consider installing the force main up at Water Avenue or something like that there. But I think it's important for us all to be able to say we're sharing in this, or we're participating in this project.
Thanks.
Kathy? Brian?
And just, this is gonna be sized to accommodate any other expansion up in the LCD.
Well, I think I thought carefully about how I said that. Known existing uses. So for instance, there might be a known use coming to the top of the Black Earth compost site. But we don't know what would ever become, what might happen in the site behind us. So I think that we're going to leave some capacity, but we can't, obviously there's cost to making it 3 times the size of our need or something like that. You comfortable with that, Charlie?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's what we talked about.
Okay, you mentioned Black Earth. How about the medical group?
Yeah, they would fall into that same category.
Okay, thank you.
For the grant to be submitted, is it DPW town administrator who are involved with this? Who all would need to be
Yes.
approving?
It does take your formal approval. So at this point, it would be a green light to submit the letter of interest. If the letter of interest was well received, and we were invited to submit a full application, then you would be asked to approve the full application.
And I believe that based on having filled out the application in draft form, I believe it would actually be Greg who should press send on the email.
And then I have another question. How does this fit with, if we need to put funds into this from the town, where would this fit in our town meeting schedule?
So it would be,
We may need to go back to the,
well, most likely be a year from now. We put our element in. You could consider at the fall town meeting. So those are your two choices, next fall or next
so
April.
next April would be early enough to actually get the grant before
Right, so
January.
Final
before-
grant would be contingent on
Okay,
X dollars coming into the pool.
The town approval at a meeting.
and I guess it's a little early to ask where we find that extra $1 million.
Well, I'm not sure the figure.
Yeah.
So let's. It would require some adjusting of the capital. budget. But it's not out of the question of the magnitude. We were looking at similar size projects.
I have a question for both Chuck and Peter. How much time do you need for an RFP as far as soliciting proposals, bids, once we know that the funds are in place?
Chuck, I'll let you answer that because it's public procurement.
It was a little muddled. I didn't quite hear it in the audio. Can you repeat it for me, Brian?
We're having trouble here, or I'm having trouble hearing you as well. Anybody?
All right, I will enunciate, Chuck.
Thank you.
What would be the time frame, or as far as from the time we know there's an award, the time that you have to put out RFPs and then breaking ground? How much time do you need?
So I think the working kind of theory is we would get go to that one, Greg. The bidding and procurement would, take place from kind of when we find out we get the grant. I think Charlie, when I've talked to Charlie, it sounds like they should have no problem pulling together the final design kind of late fall. So we put it out to bid, in the December, January timeframe, and then we, typically need a month to sign all the paperwork. For this project, like Ann was mentioning, we need to kind of figure out where the town funds are coming from and how much. So if we had to wait till Springtown meeting to finalize that number, if there were no other way, then we would just kind of elongate that award timeframe, because we wouldn't be able to actually sign the contract until we had all the money available. So that's kind of what I would say is like kind of our backstop date of, town meeting a year from now, a year and a couple of weeks. But then, so that's, generally 30 to 45 days is what we need to bid something and award it.
Your schedule is pretty fluid. I mean, it's all contingent upon that. You don't have any set turnover dates.
No, but I think we do want to put it in the 24 season, not the 25 season, only because it gets very late in the game.
Curious.
John?
Yeah, but a question for Chuck. Chuck, this water line, is there any boosting capacity that's needed, or is there enough water pressure to go up there? Because I know that's been a concern as you get farther out from town.
Yeah, so this loops back to School Street. So, the work that we just did on School Street will help a little bit. And the work that we've done already to date on Forest Street will help a lot. And then this is kind of the final restriction along that route. There is a little piece of pipe on the, where we stopped the project this year on School Street that will do it. But we do have another task here where Charlie and me, as well as Tate and Howard, who did our water model, will kind of, do the final calculations on that and make sure that, everybody gets what they need. But generally think we'll be okay.
Okay.
I think. Do you need an official vote or?
We have to have a vote to approve submitting a letter of interest.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved Dan Harrison, seconded Brian Solacey. Kathy Bellata.
Yes.
John Round,
Yes.
Brian Solacey.
Yes.
Ann Harrison.
Yes.
Becky Jakes says yes. Okay. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you. And. All right. Next up, we have Western Woods. And how soon before we can get these, the slides, and could we get, I thought that, at the planning board meeting, it was mentioned that all that would be put online as well.
I can share that for you as well.
That'd be great, because then we can have it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, excellent, thank you. Okay. Well, hello, Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Hello.
welcome back to the other side of the table.
Sure.
That's on my bag.
Oh, I can actually-
I'm gonna have to. Okay.
I can see my slide.
Great.
Interesting to be on this side of the table.
Awesome.
I'm here representing the Conservation Commission as the lead town body on the Western Woods. And I have raised my hand to say that I would take the lead within the Conservation Commission on this project. You may or may not know that there was recently completed a forestry management plan for the Western Woods that came up in December and was finalized at that time. And some of what I'm presenting to you is from that plan. And in general, I'm going to be talking about what the goals are for the Western Woods, involving the Conservation Commission's viewpoint, as well as, to some degree, the viewpoint of the open space and recreation planning that's been done by that committee. So we go to the next slide. The Western Woods is an area that's accessed right now primarily in Manchester through a small parking area and trail at the end of Crooked Lane. It's west, in general, west of Pine Street, south of 128, the area along the top of that curve is 128, and the area, the line coming down the left-hand side of that figure is the town of Beverly's town line with Manchester. Within the Western Woods, there are four major areas of ownership. Currently, the town owns about 158 acres. The Manchester Essex Conservation Trust owns about 148 acres. 159 acres are in private hands, and there's this enigmatic 77 acres that is of unknown ownership. There's been attempts to investigate the ownership area that is in purple up there, which is the area of unknown ownership. And it makes up, I believe, I don't have that note with me, but I believe it's about 8 parcels. And there are attempts that have been ongoing with the assessor's office and some contractors working to identify who the owners of those areas might be. Clearly, there's a tax concern about that nobody's paying taxes on that. And it does involve a fairly significant amount of land in the Western Woods. So where
Jeff, just because I can't read that, the on the left-hand side, what are the areas that are slashed?
Yeah.
The areas that are slashed are the areas that are unknown.
Okay, so the
So,
I thought the purple.
Oh, I thought the purple was.
well, it was hard to get the colors of this to match this and hard to get a slash map,
Mhm.
but, oh, there you go, touch it and it goes away.
Purple.
So I think the.
No, the purple area in here is the area that's unknown.
Right.
This area is all privately owned. The hatched area is all privately owned. And the blue area is the town ownership and MECT owns the
Okay,
ground.
okay, so consider slash to be red, got it, okay.
Now, why is all that important? Who owns what? Currently, there are a number of different goals, and if we can go to this next slide, Greg. There are a number of different goals that we have for the Western Woods. These come out of the Forestry Management Plan and the Open Space and Recreation Plan. Number one is conserving and enhancing water quality. This area is part of the watershed for the town, and we want to maintain the water quality in the area as best we can. To do that, over the next click, we need to both preserve the wetlands that are in the area, which will also support water quality. And the next click, manage the forest sustainably for the forest's long-term health, since the forest itself supports our water quality. The second major use of the Western Woods, or perspective on the Western Woods, if you could click again, Greg, is improving access for passive recreation, including walking, hiking, and environmental study. All of this is enhanced if there are well-marked trails, and when you have this patchwork of ownership of the land, you run into all kinds of significant problems with trails. The trails are, many of the trails are marked with blazes. Some of the private owners have torn blazes off of the trails as they cross their property. That leaves people confused about where they're going. I spent 3+ hours a couple of Sundays ago walking through Western Woods with MECT director Patrice Murphy and Jeff Koshin, who is a trustee for the MECT, and Steve Gang, who's the chair of the Conservation Commission. And there's no sign that says crossing into private land, crossing into town land, crossing into unknown land, crossing into MECT property. There's no signs that indicate that anywhere in the Western Woods.
Are there property owners who allow passage? Or do we know? I mean.
We don't know why these signs are disappearing. The trailblazers are disappearing. It's not an extensive problem, but it is a problem, particularly in terms of navigating.
But do we have some landowners who said, you're welcome to pass on my property, and others who've said, no, you may not pass on my property?
We don't even know that,
Okay,
because who would they speak to,
well,
other than the people who are walking? There are, I should correct that, because last Sunday, or Monday, I went on, it was Sunday. I went on a walk with the Open Space and Recreation Committee, looking at cart track that are old deeded rights of way, because this land was originally a forested town commons where people went in and crossed into their property and took out trees and used it for lumber or used it for heating.
And the town reserved the ability to maintain those
Yes.
for necessary access.
Not just the town, but they were deeded,
No, I mean,
the access to those properties was deeded across.
but recently the town, in accept, well, yeah, go ahead.
In the open space and recreation plan.
Yeah.
Yes, that's in the open space and recreation plan, but there are people who are telling us, neighbors that we saw this week, that no one has a right to cross this. I've checked with my lawyer and I'm gonna fight it. And they have many reasons for that, one of which was their own privacy, but also threats to their animals, people throwing rocks at their dogs, and otherwise acting in ways that we would not expect people to act when they were walking in the woods. So there is some evidence of pushback on finding other access to the woods, other than the one that's in Manchester at the end of Crooked Lane, and the one that's in Beverly at the end of Prescott Street.
Prescott, right?
And so we're looking at access through the area behind Brookwood to these cart paths. We're looking at the area, looking at other areas on by Walker Road and other areas around the town, around the woods. Greg, why don't you just tag off the last three of these? So the other goals are to promote biological diversity and enhance habitat for birds who are harbinger of the health of the forest and small and large animals. There is hunting that goes on in the woods and it's done on private property. It raises issues around the use of long rifles in hunting in that area, and that bullets don't recognize the end of the private property line. Those are some of the goals that we have for the Western Woods from the Conservation Commission and the Open Space and Recreation Plan. Next slide. Plan to meet those goals. Thank you. The first step is to develop an inventory of town-owned parcels that need conservation easements. We own, as a town, a number of parcels in the Western Woods that are not protected for conservation. And there's one that was purchased at town meeting. Is it 3 years ago, this April?
I think coming up on 3 years.
Okay, it's referred to as the Alpers property, at Christian Hill, and that the purchase was also to include doing a conservation easement, and to my knowledge, that has not been completed yet. That's a conservation restriction. That's one route to go in. There is a second route to go in that we as a town can go in. It's in Article 97, which is part of the state constitution, and would allow us to bundle a number of properties with a third party, not the town, to do management of the conservation aspects of it. And that could be done through town meeting, and then it would carry the same weight as a conservation restriction, although it is reversible. It's tough to reverse. It takes a 2/3 vote of both houses of the legislature to reverse because it's a home rule petition. So we first need to identify those parcels that are not protected for conservation. We, in that process, need to establish a system to identify and certify potential vernal pools, which would put further restrictions on parcels in the town-owned areas of the woods. And in the walk that we did, Steve Gang and I did with Patrice Murphy and Jeff Goshen of MECT, Patrice mentioned that she was going to be working on identifying potential and actual vernal pools in the MECT properties. And she had help from the environmental police who were not charging them to do that. And that she offered to work with us to help to identify the vernal pools in the town properties. If she had access to the town properties. I'll come back to that in a little bit. There are also ways of doing further research on this area with a state partnership grant, and that usually a partnership grant implies that there's a third party that's not the town, and MECT is interested in working with us on that as well. One of the things that Open Space and Recreation Planning is working on right now with an outside consultant is right-of-way mapping. And then we would need to do some legal research to see whether the right-of-ways that have been identified can be worked out in a way that's satisfactory to both the town and the neighbors. We don't see this as a confrontational thing. We see it as something we'd like to work along with the letters and come to a solution that was satisfying to both sides. Another plan in terms of meeting the goals for passive recreation is to update the existing trail network on town-owned parcels, including access signage, trail markings, informal side trails, etc. MECT has purchased a parcel at the top of Crooked Lane in the woods and is setting aside that parcel to put in a small parking area, because the parking area that exists now is basically a very small area in front of a fire gate. And finally, to identify the owners of the unknown parcel, so that if we make a plan going forward in the very long term to try and acquire more of the privately owned land, those people are. So that's basically where we are. And the goals and the plan to meet those goals. Tonight, I'm here to ask for the select board's endorsement to develop coordinated planning with Manchester Essex Conservation Trust for resource protection and community access. And very in a specific way, near-term support for working with MECT to identify the vernal pools on town-owned parcels. As the custodians of town-owned land, the select board has a yay and nay over whether we work with an outside organization to do this or whether we do it ourselves. And just in terms of the urgency of this request, the certification window for vernal pools is mid-March to early May. And you have to wait until next mid-March to early May.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board, Kathy?
Yeah, first of all, I'm shocked that we don't know who owns 77 acres of land in Manchester by the sea. I am.
That's in the Western Woods. I'm not going to speak for all of it. Just a bunch.
So they got me with that one. Yeah, no, I support the plan. I guess my question is there anything other, when you say you need support, is it just our endorsement? Are there any funds? Are there any pull on town resources? Because we've got a lot of committees pulling on a lot of resources, and I'm kind of looking at that right now.
I understand. if we need resources, we would try and do it through partnership grants. We're not here tonight to tap town resources. We're here asking for general endorsement of the idea of working with MECT, who's the primary landowner and a conservation organization, towards strengthening the conservation status of this land for the use of all town residents. So no, there's not a backdoor request for funds.
Well, even just personnel, their time. So I guess what I would ask is, I support what you guys are trying to do. If personally, I'd like the board to get an update on where you're at. Maybe after the vernal pool discussion, it's end of second quarter-ish.
Sure.
If that makes sense, but before you do start pulling on, Chuck or someone else in town hall for their time, I think I'd like to see a plan with dates as to what needs to happen when, so that, and that can be run through Greg, but I think we're trying to coordinate the use of town resources as efficiently as possible, and we're kind of doing a lot of investigating on that right now. So there are certain areas of the town hall that are, they get a lot of requests from a lot of different boards and committees. So we're just trying to figure out the best way to get that support. Do you have any sense as to when you might need some support from
Chris per town? Would you need Chris?
Well,
And the
we certainly
assessors office?
need Chris's support.
Yeah.
As the conservation administrator,
Yeah.
and particularly if we go to grant, we may need her support and may need,
Assessors,
what's that?
assessors office?
I approached the assessor's office just to get an understanding of where they were in the process of identifying these parcels. I haven't received the information yet. There's been a lot of challenges in doing this. In the field, the boundaries for these properties have to be defined. And when you're defining the boundaries of the properties, it may be from the old hickory tree to the stone wall. And the old hickory tree 100 years ago turned to dust. And so it can be very challenging. The stone walls are still there, but some have been changed or moved around a little bit. They form many of the boundaries that we see in plot plans.
So maybe like I said, I think I'd like to see a plan.
Okay, and I'm going to say right now, it's 7:30 and we're gonna keep going on this just a little bit longer.
Right.
But we do have the fire budget discussion. So I want to keep us kind of moving along with the questions on this.
Yeah, that was it. I just would, if
No,
they're
that's
gonna be
okay.
ongoing use of town resources, I support what they're gonna be doing in the spring and would like to see a little bit more of a schedule and a plan. And I think late second quarter would be reasonable if that's okay.
And that can go to Greg, so that if the board is amenable, then you can do your March, May window. If, John?
Yeah, just a couple of things, like Kathy, I was kind of surprised that so many parcels were unknown. I assume that they've been unknown for a while. I assume that the tax assessor has been chasing these people. I'm not optimistic they're going to find out very much, because I've got to believe there's been some effort. I don't know how hard, but a lot of these,
So we have been using the CP preservation funds
yeah.
to try to do the detailed deed research. So we made some progress. We have identified some owners that were previously unknown.
This is over what period of time?
Over the last three years or so.
All right, well, that's a while.
And we continue to chip away at it. It is slow going. You're plowing through some very old documents in the registry of deeds. and trying to piece together the chain of title.
Right. So what's the zoning for this right now? Is this residential zoning or something? It's not part of the LCD.
No,
No,
This is just straight residential. I don't know what the minimum size is or anything like that. Okay. Well, I endorse the program. I'm trying to picture and say, okay, let's take a look and see what the blue and the green is, and you put it together, and that's 60% of it, and it's kind of contiguous. Much of it's contiguous, so that's good. So those are all the questions.
Brian?
No, no questions. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
I mean, this is not unique to Manchester and so
yeah, these are woodlots.
yeah, these are woods.
It's
this is an
unique.
old community, so
Things were handed down informally and handed in wills with not very specific designations.
anyway, no, I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm certainly happy with the vernal pool identification and I think when we were hearing about Christian Hill, we heard from the Parks and Rec people about more active use of that space.
mhm.
And I don't want to get in an agreement with the Conservation Trust for purely passive recreation and then discover that we're cutting another part of the town off.
Mhm.
So if you,
I think that's a great point.
Sorry, can I just ask one more question, just in general for my educational purposes, the list of responsibilities that was on the prior slide. Who's responsible for like fire protection of this area? Because when I was looking through the presentation, it may not fall under, Concom. I was thinking about last year when we had those bad droughts and there were these brush fires. So I'm looking at the fire chief, I'm like, who is responsible for analyzing that area for the prevention of fires through some maintenance program?
That's the management
That's
aspect.
the
That's
management.
the management
Yeah.
aspect.
So that's the town hall,
Yeah, so that comes under the open space and recreation
open space and
in
recreation,
conjunction with conservation.
and the forestry management plan.
Mhm.
And
the forestry management, that's what, who's the department,
Conservation Commission.
that's a commission. I didn't realize that the commission has responsibility for operational maintenance of, that's my question. This is an operational maintenance question.
That would
So
not be-
so through the agent, through the conservation. agent.
The conservation agent, okay, got it, thank you.
so let me ask you, are there a lot of fire roads back, a lot of fire roads back there?
Oh, there are a lot of fire roads. I wouldn't want to take a truck in there.
No, I've talked to some old timers here.
It's,
So the DPW used to go back there and clear out all the old fire roads. I was just curious, that's fallen by the wayside.
there are fire roads, there are roads that go through, they're more like cart roads. And
I guess my point.
they're not passable by heavy equipment.
I guess my point
It's not
was
very
that
accessible.
back 50, 60 years ago, Tom, you can speak to this probably, is that I guess the DPW would take it upon themselves to clear fire roads.
There, when Western Woods was brought before select board, however many years ago now, 3, 4. That it was written into the plan presented by the then town planner to have a road that was maintained so that the forests could be managed. Beyond that, I don't think any forestry plan has been done.
But, yeah,
So this
so the
would.
plan has been done, but not executed.
Okay,
So there is a plan,
There's a plan,
but it has not been implemented.
correct.
okay.
If I can just,
It was just adopted this past fall.
so I am happy to endorse the vernal pools, but until there's a coordinated plan that includes not just Conservation Commission and MECT, but also all other parties who are interested in open space. I'm hesitant to say, yes, go ahead and set plans in motion.
I think what we need, as indicated by this discussion, is that there's overlapping jurisdictions
Mhm.
and overlapping interests in this area. And I would hesitate to propose yet another task force. But there is a need to coordinate among these parties. When you say, Kathy, you know, what are you going to be, what kinds of town resources are you going to be needing? We need to first get a coordinated idea of what these goals are.
Need a strategy for the Western Woods. Is that a fair statement?
Well, there is a strategy, and that's the forest management plan.
Okay, and I'm going to bring this, I'm gonna wrap this up now. Sorry to interrupt. I did want to ask Jeff, and I am completely in favor of going forward with the determining what the vernal pools are. I think that that's a straightforward assessment that can easily precipitate any other decisions that might need to be made. My concern is, does this obligate the town in any way to MECT? If they are providing this, A, is it free of charge? B, again, does it obligate the town to anything? To MECT?
Not to MECT.
So there's no way we're gonna see any kind
No
of.
strings attached, is what I'm saying. You know, it's,
Well, MECT is the second largest holder of land in this area.
I understand that. I'm just saying.
We're asking to work with the second largest abutter to town property to try and make strategies together that work.
I understand that. I do. And one concern I have is I don't, again, want the town to be obligated to MECT, and I would not want
Obligated in what way?
in any way.
Anyway.
And I also I would want to make sure that the assessment of vernal pools that's done is done by an independent party, not specifically by MECT.
Well, it's being done by MECT and the environmental police. Is that independent? I'm not sure.
My concern,
I don't think you have an obligation. If
they identify.
If the pool is identified, then that's a resource. That
absolutely,
gets mapped and that has a host of state level and local level protections. But
which I think is critical to know about. But again, I just,
Can you be a little more specific about what you are concerned about?
if MECT is doing a study of some kind. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you all very much.
Will we then at some point either have to pay for part of it or in any way? I guess I'm just
They're not asking for money.
not right now.
But, okay, we identify, I think we all agree that mapping vernal pools is a good thing.
Perfect.
And that the town wants to map vernal pools. And I don't see MECT coming back to us 10 years from now and saying, oh, we mapped your vernal pools and therefore you need to give us all of your land. Not gonna happen. Just so.
Okay, do we want to go forward in terms of endorsing the
Working with, I move that we agree that the Conservation Commission can work with MECT to identify vernal pools on town-owned parcels.
That's it.
Greg, in the western.
In the western
That's
woods.
approved.
Okay.
I second that.
Okay, moved by Ann Harrison, seconded by Brian Solacey. Debbie, do you have that wording? Roll call vote, Kathy Bellata.
Yes.
John Round,
Yes,
Brian Solacey.
Yes,
Ann Harrison.
Yes.
And Becky Jake says yes. Thank you, Mr. Bodmer Turner.
Okay, so I'll be back with a more comprehensive plan and all my requests for skeleton.
Thank you.
you guys, this side of the table is double. So. We're carrying,
All right.
we're carrying a higher load here, and it's getting a little tired.
Thank you, Jeff. Say hi to Sandy. All right, next up, we have a budget discussion, and we are starting with fire department overtime. Chief Clary.
Yeah. Present.
All right. Greg, how do you want to do this?
Well, just to tee it up, obviously each year we approve a budget with X amount of dollars for various line items. There can be some flexibility in lines. A small amount from reserve fund, final spending controls, or we occasionally will shift some dollars from one line to another to cover some shortfalls. In this particular case, we run into a pretty significant shortfall if we continue on the trend that was established in the fall. So just to set the stage, two firefighters retired last this summer, spring into summer. One retired and one person moved on to a live department. In addition, the budget allowed for a second floater to be hired. So during the hiring process, three strong candidates were selected. However, none had firefighter certification. They were not firefighter 1 and 2 trained.
Which is typical, is that for the most part, is it?
It varies a lot. If you were to prioritize, paramedic versus firefighter, it's much more difficult to get the paramedic licensure. That's a more stringent, it's a longer time frame. It's a more challenging process.
To get the paramedic
To
over
get
the
the
fire.
paramedic, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and frankly, the majority of our calls are medical. And so that paramedic training is, I hate to prioritize one or the other, but if I had to, I would probably say that is more important. So where we ran into problems with the budget is because those new hires did not have their firefighter certification. The department felt that it was necessary to bring on a fourth person. So we had the two regular, the new hire trainee without the fire certification, and then bringing on in an overtime situation, one of the other staff were off days to fill in. So in order to have those three fully trained firefighters on duty. So that caused us to go into a deficit, use up all of the overtime funds and then some up to this period. And so without an additional appropriation, our hands are tied. We can only spend the monies that voters have approved. And so without an additional appropriation, I told the chief that we needed to cut back and go down to 2, that we can no longer continue with 4 on the trainee plus a fourth becomes a third firefighter, but it's the fourth person. That causes some concern. Having just 2 on is not as good as having 3. It allows the ambulance to run, but if it's a large medical incident, it's very nice to have that third. And certainly in a fire situation, you're gonna need to wait for mutual aid before you're able to address a fire. And minutes count in a fire in an active fire situation. So there is some displeasure with that, the situation right now. I view it as temporary. We do have the new hires, the two new hires are going to the academy in the next couple of months. They'll be fully trained by end of June. And both you and the finance committee have approved as part of the FY24 budget, 2 additional staff for the fire. So that would bring the staff to a total of 16. So that is a 33% increase in staffing in the last 3 years. Brings the department to 16 firefighters plus the chief. It'll obviously, we don't snap your fingers and have those 2 new people start right away, but we're able to position ourselves to do that. And once we are in that position, it will allow the 4 crews of 4. And when someone is on taking leave time, you drop down to 3. And it will significantly reduce any overtime needs for the department, barring major injury of 3 or 4 people, which you can't control, but nonetheless, it establishes a very solid staffing for the department.
Do we?
So I just feel like, even though we do have a crunch right now, the light is shining at the end of the tunnel, and that we will be able to move forward in a very substantial way.
Do we know? I know that we've run with 2 on for over the years, many times. How long do you know how long we've been operating with 3 and 4 on?
The third firefighter was added 14 years ago.
Okay.
And when Chief Beardsley was here, he increased the staffing to 4.
Okay.
And a lot of that was because it was during COVID and would be covered by COVID. And just to tag team off some of the things Greg said, the full-time fire academy is 10 weeks, 8 hours a day. It's 800 hours. Paramedic training is 1,200 hours on your own time. It may be every Saturday for a year, and then you spend about 400 to 500 clinical hours riding with other ambulance services and working in the hospital. There's no guarantee, and this was where it came up with the finance committee as to what they were trying to set for parameters for training, is there's no guarantee that somebody goes to paramedic school and passes and becomes a paramedic.
Right.
So if you're concerned about turnover, the likelihood of them graduating and being good firefighters graduating from the fire academy is a higher percentage than somebody going to paramedic school, then no longer becoming a paramedic. And because of the parameters we have running ALS, 2 years now they're gone and we have to replace them again because they didn't make that. They've sent people in the past that have had to try and test and retest. And there's always no guarantee that that's going to happen. And with respect to running over on overtime, historically, if you look, the overtime has always been underfunded based on what we've spent on the year before.
Well, I would
public
say
safety.
that one of the issues that I mean, and I've been involved with approving more hirees for the fire department. But I totally missed it, which is not out of the realm of possibility, or it wasn't stated that when you hire a firefighter, that person does not hit the ground ready. So you still have that overtime that you're going to have to be, and so when we've been asked to increase firefighters before, it's to address overtime.
Right.
And with the understanding that, okay, well, overtime's going to go down. Well, it's not, because it can't go down until these people, when and if, or if
Right.
they're fully trained. So I think that that is something that has not been clearly presented when being asked for more.
Well,
Staff.
to
Can I
speak to
follow
that,
up
oh, can I just answer her? So to speak to that, the goal we've always had is to get to a minimum of 4 people on shift. So we have 2 in, 2 out. When we got our first floater, it was to cover the groups of 3
Mhm.
when somebody was out on leave.
Right.
So the goal of that floater was to reduce overtime, but it never increased our on-duty shift staffing or the level of service we could provide. And then when we got the second floater, that was again to reduce overtime because they're covering another set of shifts of vacation and sick time. Yet no shift is ever getting up to 4.
So
Okay.
if I could follow up
Yes.
with that, so I understand your comment, Becky, because I have to tell you, when we had that joint meeting with the finance committee. And I don't know why I felt this way, but I felt blindsided. I don't use that word lightly, and the reason I felt blindsided is because we've been spending weeks talking about an ambulance, the squad.
Mhm.
I don't recall, and I went back through my notes for a bunch of meetings. I don't recall hearing that we were overspending our overtime budget. So the way I look at the situation we're in, we have 2 decisions to make. One is, what do we do over the next 4 months until the end of the fiscal year? Because we're in a pickle, okay? But the good news is, we've already voted to recommend an increase in staffing for the next year, so we're okay next year.
With 2
The
different
problem-
stipulations.
Right.
though,
Right, so,
Different sets.
right,
of-
so we've got to figure out what to do over the next 4 months.
Mhm.
But I would like us to take an action to improve our budgeting, our financial management process, so that we have a closer eye on the actuals trends. Okay, there are some very simple things that organizations do to monitor budgets, and before we ask for, or should I say, implement staffing increases, we should be budgeting those hours in on a monthly basis. Okay, we should be looking at a more detailed view of the budget than we do right now. I don't want to get into the details, but there's a way to correct this communication disconnect, so that we don't get surprised again. But I want there to be no mistake. This was a surprise. I don't know why. And I do think we need to correct that too. So I think we've got 2 decisions to make, and I'll let others chime in.
John,
So a question, and I was at the finance meeting, chief, and I know that they voted for 2 additional firefighters. And there was a stipulation that those folks be firefighters, not necessarily paramedics,
Right.
and they gotta go to school. And of course, that's the driver from overtime that we're all talking about. All of a
Right.
sudden, these guys disappear for 10 weeks.
Right.
What is the lapse in your estimation? I know it's harder to hire these
Yep,
guys.
go ahead.
So tell me, if you get the green light for 2 guys and they've got to be firefighter certified, what's the lag time? In which case, we're going to be stuck with overtime until you find these people.
Could be a year, could be 2 years.
That's a long time.
So, but let me explain. When we hired these 3 new guys, in order to get to the fire academy, you have to be hired by a department. You have to pass an NFPA 1582 physical. You have to pass the state physical agility test. When you meet all those criteria, an application can be put into the Mass Fire Academy to get them a slot in recruit school. You can't get a slot based on people you're about to hire. All those things have to be met. Once you get in that queue, you're in the queue with all the other firefighters in the state that need to be trained. The academy can't keep up with the demand and the turnover within the department. So when I got these guys hired in October and got their applications into the academy, they were given a July 1 date to start the academy, and that was the earliest academy in the state that had any opening. And that was 9 months.
And then at that point in time, there should have been a rebudgeting
Right.
okay? Because you, as you said,
Mhm.
you knew back in
Yep.
October, right, that we weren't gonna be able to use them as we
Right.
had intended. At that point, and I don't know where the breakdown was, there should have been a realignment of the budget. Okay, and it should have been brought back to this, at least the finance committee, if not the select board, to say, hey, okay,
Right.
our plans have changed, we're in a pickle, what do we do? Because the decisions we have to make right now are gonna be really different than the decisions we could have
Understood.
made last October, and that's kind of why I'm a little upset.
Right.
It deals with expectations.
Right, and I had laid out some expectations, I believe, as of a letter on August 22nd. Saying that because the two people left, and at that point, we hadn't hired yet in October. That we were gonna be in trouble with
So-
overtime to start with.
Understand, I guess what I'm saying though, and this is not, I do think this is a budget communication
Okay.
issue, okay? And we need to fix it because my concern is, are there any other surprises out there in any other town departments? That's my concern, okay? So I think we do have to, I don't even know who reviews other than yourself, you know, the actuals to budget on a monthly basis. I presume the finance committee does, right?
Both review,
Okay,
chief was not given a green light to do what he did.
okay.
So
Okay.
we don't need to go down that road.
No, we don't.
Nope.
However, I would like to suggest that if we perhaps consider doing what companies do, which is they have a quarterly earnings call. So that you bear your financials to the entire world, okay? Here's where you're at, and I'm wondering if we could get a quarterly report at the select board level of the variances to budget. You know, who's overrunning,
That's already produced.
But I wanna,
Finance committee gets that. I'm
Okay.
happy to include you on that.
yes, okay.
and I do want to go back to those. So when this came back to FinCom and you as staff manager, the overtime was denied, the excess overtime. So, and the chief, and so overtime, so in other words, we have unapproved overtime that's approved.
Yes, again.
Yep,
Yes.
that's okay, because I will say, I've heard you very clearly and repeatedly say with Concom. No,
Income.
FinCom.
what did I say? Thank you all, FinCom, not CC. So this is problematic.
And what I tried to present prior is, since I started, and for the past 10 years, or at least the past 6, if not the past 10, the fire department has requested an overtime budget. It's been cut for that year, has been overspent without ramifications, without censure, without a lot of fanfare, and then money transfers have been made at the end of that fiscal year based on the balance sheet and what's left on the bottom line budget for public safety, for both fire and police. If you look at the current, where we're spending, we are over on overtime. You look at the current police spending, they are over on overtime. And this has been the historic pattern. So without knowing that it was a problem, because it has gone on, without something being said, there's no reason for me to expect this time that it was going to be different than previous times.
Mhm.
Now, that may be negative assumptions or wrong assumptions on my part. But in talking to Chief Fitzgerald, they're always over and they're out of overtime by every December also. Same as fire, and that's been historically the trend. And I just got numbers from Andrea for fire, police, and DPW that support that contention. And that's just based on the annual budgeting.
And that's
So
on
again,
us.
I don't want to go down too far of a rabbit hole here.
Yeah.
With the order of magnitude this year is significantly different.
Okay,
So yes, to the tune of about $80,000 over budget, we've been able to accommodate.
right.
Police has grants, they pay for most of that. We've gone 200,000 on the fire side. So that's about 80,000 more than budgeted. We have been able to absorb that. The current burn rate, fire overtime, is north of $340,000. So that is materially different. And that's why the concern, and that's why.
And that's simply not sustainable. We can't,
I can't find that penny.
I understand, and
So,
I-
again, I don't need to get into all the.
right, and it's being, watching, this is incredibly important. I'm not trying to,
No,
I just want to keep us moving.
Yep.
And as Greg says,
I,
not go down
I
the
can
road.
let you know that I looked ahead, there's one group that because of the way everybody shook out, has 2 full-timers and 1 trainee. So anytime somebody is out on that group, requires overtime to keep the 2 fully trained firefighter minimum. I looked between now and June 30th. There are 47 times currently on the books that we will drop from 3 to 2. And that affects our ability on every one of those 2-person calls, that's not a basic medical aid, requires us calling mutual aid. Fire alarm activation, car accident on the highway, carbon monoxide activation, hazardous materials spill. So at least if something were to happen on any of those shifts, that's 47 times we're relying on mutual aid. Because mutual aid compact that we've signed with Essex County says you will not send a fire truck mutual aid without 3 people. Those 47 times for that 24-hour period, we will not be able to support our mutual aid partners that rely on us, yet we'll be calling them sooner. I just want to make that clear that that's what
You,
the ramifications of a 2-person shift is.
you've made it quite clear, however, that you feel that we carry a major burden on our ambulance.
For the ambulance, yes,
On mutual aid.
yes.
Okay, so I don't know if it's a quid pro quo here, but I'm not overly concerned in that regard.
And it depends what the other towns think. You know, I mean, when you're minimally staffed, of course, you're not
I can
necessarily.
tell you already that we normally go to Ipswich on a 2nd alarm. We've now been bumped down that we're not going to Ipswich on a 3rd alarm because they can't rely on us to come. I had worked out an automatic aid line box response with Beverly. Beverly was gonna come all the way in to Ashland Ave, all the way to Crocker's Boatyard on anything we had on that end of town automatically. And we were going Hale Street up to Lee's Crossing. When we're dropping to 2, I had to tell Chief O'Connor, we cannot do this line box response because you'll be coming to our community. And this many times we will not be able to fulfill us and you will not be able to count on us coming to your community. And unfortunately, that's not how mutual aid works. And we're signed members of that compact. So I know that's less important than us having the 4 people to have a safe shift or a minimum of 3, which in my book is the absolute minimum safest shift for our own protection of the firefighters responding to calls. So they don't get put in precarious situations. We don't have to rely on mutual aid.
Yeah, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Town has a budget. The town meeting votes that budget. There have been rumors around that it's the selectmen who were saying no, that, and we have pots of money somewhere that we could pay for this stuff with. We don't. You were given a budget. And you have been spoken to about the level of spending that you were doing on overtime. I don't know where the money can come from. And I don't want people to work overtime and not get paid. And that's almost the corner you're putting us in.
I'm just trying to maintain safe staff.
There's nobody who doesn't want everybody kept safe. Nobody wants that. We have a town of approximately 5,500 people. We've had a town of approximately 5,500 people for 40 years over that. And that same number of people are paying an ever increasing budget. And we all vote on that budget. You know, if any of us in our home lives, what happens if we exceed what our income is? And that's where we are, chief. I mean, I,
Understood?
So Greg, let me get this straight. We're $340,000 plus or minus over budget right now.
Sorry,
On the overtime is $340,000.
no, if we continue,
Okay, so that $130,000 is factored into that. I'm not talking $500,000.
correct.
But and if we if we made a smaller transfer of some sort, could we alleviate some of the angst? Are we, I guess what I'm asking is focusing back on the next 4 months. We're in a lousy place, but what are our options? I understand we just can't magically move money around, but what are the options?
So option one is to go to 2.
Go to 2, yeah.
That's option 1.
Okay.
Option 2 would be to do, what did you say, 47 times?
Yeah.
Where you need to
It's, well, based on the amount of times we'd be dropping to 2 in the next, till June 30th, it's 47 shifts.
how much money?
So
It
that's
equals somewhere around 50 to $60,000. It's about $1,000 a shift with overtime for a 24-hour shift based on the average time and a half rate across.
So that's if the 2 became a 3.
Yes, that's for every time in the future between now and then, we filled one of those slots with overtime.
And a corollary with this is, are you and Greg on the same wavelength as to what the minimum staffing should have been and is going forward?
Well,
Right now, I understand 2
That's- I-
firefighters minimum,
Yes.
and,
It's 2 firefighters minimum, 3 if everybody shows up
Can we
for
let
shift.
Greg go through the
okay,
options?
go ahead,
Okay,
Greg.
and also because staffing is not us. We don't do staffing. And.
I just want to know,
Yep.
Mhm.
So I heard 2 options. Other options?
I think those are the 2. Those are the 2. You have a third.
What,
I mean, I'm
So
not,
I'm
I'm
not
not
clear
going
what the
high.
second option, I'm sorry, the second option is to,
Second option is to, on those 47 times, to hire someone on overtime to backfill, to make sure that there's 3. Now, it's not going to count the time when maybe one of the other 2 are calling out sick or something, right?
yeah, that's just for leave that's already taken.
So
that's
the
on the book.
47 in the next
Becomes-
4 months could grow to,
Yep,
more, if you gotta fill in 2 guys.
right. And that's probably the unknown.
And that money would have to come out of the finance committee's reserve fund?
So either it needs to come out of reserve fund, or we do a supplemental appropriation at town meeting. You do a supplemental to the fiscal 23 budget.
Okay, so we could allow everything that's going to happen, all of the 47 incidents and whatever else shows up. We just carry that until town meeting and hope that town meeting votes a supplemental budget. And if they don't,
is that a reserve?
there isn't that much reserve.
Right, that's
How
been,
much is in our reserve?
Well, there's 100, let's say 150.
that's been drawn down and drawn down and.
We got a $25,000 repair job for the engine.
Yeah.
That just came across the chief's desk last week.
Yep.
Which, and this is.
engine 1,
Engine one.
they have the damage pump.
Is that Sony's now?
No, still waiting on a part.
Oh,
So we have 2 options, live with the 2. Or take a risk and backfill those 47 shifts. With the hope that we could get a supplemental approved at town meeting, and if not, the risk is we'd have to take it out of reserves. That,
Yes.
I'd like to hear Greg's recommendation. Not that I'm putting the onus on you, but this is, you've been dealing with this for quite some time. And I feel, you know, we've, in being respectful of everybody's input.
So the most prudent way to proceed, I guess, would be a variation of stick to 2 until April 3rd. See if the voters have an appetite
Mhm.
to appropriate more money. If they approve it April 3rd, starting April 4th,
Okay.
we could go to the 3. To me, that's the most prudent way to proceed.
Well, and I think that makes sense. We're asking the voters what they want, rather than us making that presumption. Which, yes, it's what we do. It's part of why we've been elected. But I feel that personally, and I'll go around and ask each of you, but that's what I'm inclined to do. And that would be how many shifts, chief?
Well, 47.
Till April?
From today.
The next 5 months.
Yeah.
But from April forward.
Hold on.
No, I mean between now and April, when the
Next 5
town would
weeks.
have the
That's
opportunity.
another 6 weeks. It's gonna take me a second.
Okay,
It's not that critical.
okay, yeah, it's not, that's not a, and,
We can put a supplement in the regular annual meeting, or do we have to have a special before the annual to adjust
It
the
can be
budget?
part of the regular warrant.
Okay.
It's a separate article, but it's,
Yeah, I,
you
yes,
don't have to convene a separate meeting.
oh, I mean, it had.
It's been done before, but you can do
Okay,
it.
we can do it. The other thing that I think may have got little bit lost in the weeds is that the reserve fund belongs to the finance committee.
True.
We can't tell, we can argue with the finance
You
committee,
can request.
we can request, we can plead,
Yeah.
but
mhm.
It's their fault.
Not going there. Sarah scares me.
so. Yeah, if we go to April 3rd, then we don't have to ask the finance committee to spend their reserve funds.
Yeah.
There's currently 5 shifts. If nobody calls in sick, takes a personal day or takes a vacation day, there's 5 shifts currently open between now and April 3rd.
But you'd be asking for probably $50,000. Is that what you'd be asking for? In that warrant?
Oh, you mean after, okay.
Yeah, just round it off, just say,
50 to 60.
just say $50,000.
Are you
Okay.
comfortable that that's all it's going to be?
No.
Because
Well,
the chief-
Again, people still have vacation and personal and sick leave that they haven't taken between now and the end of the year. They just haven't put in for it. And they need 7-day notice on vacation time. Personal days, they can take whenever they want, and sick time, they can take whenever they want.
So the chief and I should sit down and review the schedule together.
Yeah,
Because I think if you've got unused vacation, that
for the fiscal year. No, I think that that's a good idea. And if you and chief, I'm happy to join if need be, but I don't, that's not your staff, it's you, so, but, okay,
So I just, let me make sure I understand completely what we've agreed. We've agreed that the fire
Don't agree on
department
anything.
will go down to 2 firefighter shifts between now and April 3rd, when necessary. And then after April 3rd, if the supplemental appropriation is agreed, then, and it is sufficient to cover, that we can go back to 3 firefighter shifts. I have one other stupid question that just came to me, which is, I thought you said that the fire academy, I thought this fire academy started in May. It starts in
It's
June.
gonna start May 1st.
It starts May,
Yeah.
okay, somebody said
So it's
July.
10 weeks, so
Somebody said
May,
July.
June, and then it was originally They were originally slated to start July 1st, and it got moved up to May 1st
moved up,
because of
okay.
I do recall that
Yeah.
conversation even a couple months ago.
Now, very quickly, I do want to, Greg, what was the amount you said for the ladder truck that came across Chief's desk, wasn't it?
that was for the engine.
Engine one.
Oh, engine one, all right. There's a question about the ladder truck. We can't really talk about that right now because that's not on our agenda. To Alex first. So we're on the agenda, it was noted department overtime. And we have to stick with that. I'm sorry. So if you have questions about that, Alex, I would suggest that you either contact Chief or Greg. Okay. Thank you. John, right?
So I still have a question. So we're kind of settled with how things are going to work out for the balance of fiscal 23. But we haven't, are we going to talk about fiscal 24?
That's the next topic.
All right,
That's,
I'll hold my,
but that's independent of,
Back on fiscal 23. Sorry,
very quickly.
I don't think I got an answer to my question. Are there any other areas of, because we're about to take a vote on a budget action for fiscal year 23. Are there any other areas of the budget with a significant variance? Or is this the last? surprise?
I'm not aware of others, no.
Okay.
Surprise could come along, but I don't anticipate.
Okay.
Surprise would be more along the lines of the equipment failure.
Okay.
I do not expect any staffing.
But the trending is that people are on budget or,
Yes.
okay,
Yes, most definitely.
All right, fiscal year 24 budget update.
So Finance Committee is winding up their work. They are meeting again this Thursday. And they hope to finalize the budgets. One of the remaining items was the health insurance increase, the rates. I was hoping for a number that was going to be lower than what we put in there. We put in 8%. I got the rate today at 7.15. So there's not a lot of savings there to be realized. So most of the departmental budgets have been approved by the Finance Committee. Majority are as submitted. They have been, as you know, for fire and police, they along with you, we've approved the additional staffing for both those departments. But our notes here for a minute. Oh, yes, we had some discussions about potential rearrangements, basically for staffing and land management, building inspector, land planner, town planner, conservation agent. So we're looking at a couple of different options. They are basically budget neutral. And so it's not a budgetary item per se. It's a question of how best to do that staff within the budgets that have been proposed. So not as critical to make final decisions on those levels right now. The other piece is the community preservation projects. So both the Community Preservation Committee and the Finance Committee have approved a list of projects for town consideration. So it would be appropriate for you to take a look at those this evening to see if you agree with those projects or not. And then the other big piece, of course, is the school budget. That the budget that the district school committee or the district has approved to present to the voters is we're calling it a correction year, if you will, in terms of no longer relying on reserve funds to pay for operating expenses. That hole was being dug fairly deep. And so this proposal for FY24 eliminates using those reserve funds and instead pay as you go. And now we're gonna rely on accumulated reserves. So to do that, the increase for Manchester is a 5.72% increase. Overall, yes.
4%.
And Essex, because of the enrollment patterns of the last few years, their increase is a little over 8%. So to pay for what is proposed both on the town side and including the increase for the school, we're looking at a 4% tax increase rather than the 2.5% that we try to target. And the reason being to pay that extra money into the school district. So we do have excess levy capacity, so it is possible to increase taxes 4% without doing an override. And so that it's still 4% hike, but you can, it just means that you can, the voters can approve that at the town meeting, and that there would not be a requirement for a ballot vote to approve it.
Yeah.
Assuming that that's how you want to pay for it. My sense is the finance committee favors that approach rather than an override. It's not necessary because you have a levy capacity.
So use levy.
I think the finance committee was interested in doing some further discussion about perhaps using some more of the town's fund balance for capital rather than taxation in order to try to bring that 4% down a little bit. But that's a discussion they have not yet had. And obviously
Would that affect any bond rating at all if we were to?
not so much bond rating for us at this point. It does impact future years' capital. So
Okay.
we've been relying on those, on that fund balance money to pay for capital items. I like having the money in my hand before I spend it. So I'm biased that way. I tend to build up those reserves in order to allow us to do a capital project. Other people don't like to see communities sitting on money. So there's a more of a desire for some to draw down that fund balance so that we're not, so that we don't have quite as much in the bank.
Well, and that's definitely something to contemplate, looking at the 40A. 3A. Whether we want more in capital or whatever. Good. Okay, all right.
So those are some of the big ticket items that are out there. So the lay of the land, like I say, overall in pretty good shape. The last thing I should say is we don't have union negotiations far enough along to determine what the wages actually will be for next year. So a couple of ways to do that. Right now, the budget assumes a 2.5% pay increase. With inflation, settlements have been higher than that. We do have on the table a way to provide a higher COLA if we can come to terms for a different health insurance plan. But we're not there yet in terms of agreements. I think the finance committee's feeling is that we wait, we stick with the 2.5 that's in the budget, we finish negotiations, and if there's a need for additional funds, that would be a supplement at the fall town meeting. Alternatively, you could put additional funds in this budget that gets approved at the April town meeting, but that's a bit of a guess.
Yeah, a couple of questions. I unfortunately missed last week's discussion, finance committee discussion. You mentioned the school budget was like going to result in a 4% tax increase for us. I recall from the prior school committee meetings, there was discussion that their current year budget is underrunning by almost $300,000. It was 290, something like that. The services they wanted to add back in, so this is not a level services budget that they're proposing. It's an increase in services, like putting some services back that I think they had previously cut. But if I recall, the total of those services could have been absorbed by the underrun in this year's budget. So was there any discussion of that at the FinCom meeting?
There's not, no.
And my last question is, our town budget plans for a 2.5% labor increase
Yes,
budget.
yes,
The school committee, what was that? Almost 4%?
just under 4.
Just under 4%. So I know we're not voting on anything tonight. I just think that when it comes time to look at the warrant,
Recording in progress.
when it comes time to look at the warrant and make our recommendations, I think it would be good to take a holistic view as to what's being proposed. I understand we vote things individually, but I would like to have that discussion. So we'll be doing that on the 6th. Is that when we when do we vote to recommend approval or not recommend approval? On the 6th.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I should actually.
And what did you want to say? Oh, sorry. Okay.
That historically has been the case. That differential in pay. That is the historical trend.
Mhm.
And in fact, it's a little less this year than most years because they're eliminating 3 full-time positions. So the increase in salary to individuals is higher than 4%. However, we don't get to tell the school committee how they spend their money. We say we approve their budget, we don't approve their budget.
But we recommend, correct?
We recommend approval or not approval. And that $290,000 that rolls into their reserve account. So you're asking that if you were to ask them to spend that on the returning you would be asking them to spend their reserves. And they've just made a decision not to spend reserves.
Yeah, it gets to budgeting, how you go about it, and I would just like to see the data requests that have come from the school committee to the administration.
And I think it goes the other way around.
Yeah.
No, the members of the school committee have made requests for data that have not been provided. And I think it's very important that happen. So, we've got some new members on the school committee and they have real financial management background. And while we understand that the special education money has always been a driver, there is a notion that there are other drivers of increased costs that have not been uncovered. So I believe the data request was for the enrollment data split by special ed versus general ed, so that we could better understand collectively the drivers of some of these increases. And that data has not been provided. And it would be helpful because we're all there's only so much money to go around, and the better we understand, the better decisions we can make.
Okay, we are currently at 8:30. And we still have to discuss town warrant, regional retirement increase of COLA. We have Chuck, who's been waiting for his 8 o'clock, and the chief of police waiting for his 8:10 or 8:30. Sorry, I'm off by that.
Pardon me, Vic, do you need me for anything else?
Chief, we're all set.
Okay.
Thank you
No,
very
I've
much.
got a question for the chief.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
That's why I asked about 24, because it specifically had to deal with the fire department.
There we go. Good
Okay.
for
All
you.
right.
So assuming you've got 2 new hires, that you get, two people added to your department next year.
Yeah.
And the discussion was, well, it's easy to find people that are EMTs as opposed to trained firefighters.
Correct.
If you go after you want people that are fully trained, so you don't lose that 10 weeks.
Yep.
How much longer is it gonna take you to find those guys? Is it a wash so that it doesn't make any difference? Because we're out the overtime one way or the other.
We may not find them at all, because, and this is why, because most of the people in Massachusetts, and I know the FinCom was making light of the fact that we hire people from New Hampshire. But New Hampshire is a non-civil service state, and in New Hampshire, in order to get hired as a firefighter, you have to come with all your certifications. Massachusetts with civil service, you can take a test with no qualifications. Any of the departments around here will hire you, send you to the academy, and you have better retirement, better protection, better mobility within the departments of civil service. So
So let me just interject. That's
Yeah.
a risk when you hire a New Hampshire guy. He gets trained and he says, I'm tired of this commute. I'm leaving.
he could,
Yeah, I'm just.
he
Well,
could, but we've
that's-
had people that
Putting that
have
out.
come to work here that live in Gloucester, and they've gone to Gloucester, and it has nothing to do with the commute.
Now,
but
we-
that's-
but
the
we
only-
don't- I wanna
All
to
right.
keep us,
Okay,
and I will say, we can discuss that. I
Yeah.
think that's something. that
happy
we
to
discuss.
answer
All right, the bottom line is, it's very hard to get fully trained firefighters.
yes, and the union
That's-
contract says that if they're not coming from 5 years of contiguous service at a full-time fire department,
Mhm.
then they have to go to the Mass Academy.
Again,
Yes, so if there's any break in service, they need to get trained.
this is not.
Greg, what did you?
right.
And I think we can,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you all. Say hi to Amy, please.
Yes.
All right, sorry, so. Where are we with budget updates? Just,
So any further comments or further informational needs that you have as you prepare for final voting? on the
Yeah.
fix? So if you don't have that with you right now, that's okay. Just let me know in the next few days if you could. What additional information are you gonna need in order to be comfortable approving a budget come from 2 weeks from now?
Kathy, you had said you wanted the actuals.
So,
Friends, is that something you?
no, what I'm proposing as an action item is for after town meeting.
Okay,
Let us get a summit together of select board, maybe FinCom, whatever. I do think there are improvements we can make to our budgeting process so that we can avoid surprises, and there may be other lessons we want to incorporate out of town meeting.
well, I also think that going forward to one of the points you've made, it's also showing savings. That I think is absolutely, okay. So anybody, any budget questions, let Greg know. Okay. Any other questions or comments on that before we go to the next? And do we, CPC, were there any questions on, 'cause Jack Burke is on? Did anybody have? Don?
Yeah, just, I guess with regard to the budget, so how are we showing these savings with the, or how the money got shifted around with regard to dispatch? Because it doesn't really show up in the budget per se. Is there a narrative that's going with this?
There will be, yes.
All right, because people will ask this question, will say, hey, more guys left, what happened? Where's that money?
That's, again, that's roughly $350,000.
Okay,
So that's something that we can,
And so,
so long as it's addressed, that's all, it's, you gotta see it somewhere.
yes,
Okay,
I believe Sarah is currently working on exactly that.
yeah, she's working on the finance committee report, which will have a narrative. Which will describe that, but again, there's a desire to see it graphically.
that's all.
did anybody have questions regarding the CPC funding? Okay, Jack, thank you very much. No questions.
Wow, that was easy. Thank you.
No.
That-
Um, that you, Jack? I just closed something out. I don't
It
even
was
know.
him.
That was it.
Thank you.
There you are, Jack. Okay, so we're all set.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack.
Do we need to vote on that?
So you will as part of your approval of the warrant next week.
General question, or timing of when, when will we get to see the final, whatever we're gonna be discussing on the sixth? Is it the usual Thursday before, or will we get any extra time?
Yeah, let me get you the revised budget after Thursday's meeting.
Okay.
We'll get that to you as soon as, certainly by Monday.
That'll be awesome.
All right, more discussion?
So, warrant items, warrant articles, so I'll just run through them quickly. But obviously, there's the standard budgetary ones, there's the town operating, there's the town capital. There's the CPC, Community Preservation Committee fund, other projects, school operating and debt. There'll be a school bond vote to pay for the replacements of the turf fields. And then another standing one is other posted employment benefit or OPEB funding. So we're putting money aside for, basically it's health insurance for retirees. There's another plan to fully fund that liability. To be fully funded by early 30s.
Wasn't there something about that might impact OPEB payments that I saw recently? Never mind. Carry on.
I mean, obviously, a lot of those funds are invested. Stock market is not doing well these days. So it's taking a bit of a hit, but you look at the long-term trend, but it'll average out. A revolving fund for the Park and Rec, that's a standard. The Board of Health is interested in having a new revolving fund for vaccinations, flu, COVID becomes an annual shot. So they're interested in having that established as a new revolving fund. Again, revolving funds are, you charge a fee, you take that money in, and then you turn right around and you use those monies to pay for the service that's being provided. So if someone gets a shot, we collect money from insurance, and those monies are used to pay for the shots. So then the planning board is looking to have up to 4 zoning articles. They're holding a hearing on those proposals next week, and make a decision as to the final wording next week as well, and get that to us. I should have grabbed the chief. The chief also, fire chief, has been seeking a couple of local option laws regarding sprinkler systems. One in boarding houses and lodging houses that would apply retroactively, but gives people a 5-year period to comply. And then the second local option is for any new buildings or major new construction renovation, major renovation.
Over 5,000 square feet, was it?
I forget the square footage, but it's for 4 units or more. Anytime you're building 4 units or more, whether it be a hotel or an apartment, you would be required to put a sprinkler system in for that new construction. So those are the anticipated articles. Unless you have other ones.
I think we need one for supplemental budget for the,
Yes.
You just added that one tonight, yes.
on the sprinkler. Do you know how many buildings in town that would affect?
It's less than a handful.
Well, that isn't.
Private home.
It's private home.
Private home budget, okay.
Yeah, there are a few, and I think that there
I
needs,
can get you a better answer. I don't know the difference.
but for some, it might be,
I mean, would it count apartment buildings?
No. not retroactively. Going forward, yes.
Okay, so the dense parts of downtown would not be. Okay, yeah, there's one way out on Summer Street. But yeah, please come back with it.
Yeah, I'd like to know the number.
Yeah.
We all,
And would that also apply to boarding houses?
It does apply.
That's, yeah,
That is retroactive.
right, and that
We
might,
have 5 years to come into compliance.
Okay. Oh, so. I don't know what morning.
I'm sorry, maybe 1 or 2. Let me get the right information.
This has been, these requests have been outstanding for, well, the 3 years that I've been here.
Kick this can down a little bit.
We kicked because with COVID and. we tried to
Desire to
reach,
keep
uh,
minimal number of articles, so yes, I think it's time to bring it forward.
Can we get language?
Yes, yes, I meant to include a more description, a more detailed description in your package. I neglected that. I do have that. And we'll have council craft the actual articles.
Okay, so for the 6th, we'll have.
Yes, you'll have that.
can we bump the, the COLA talk?
Yes,
And let's let Chuck do his thing so that we can then move on to the chief. Is that,
that's fine.
there is a question just from Alex first about, was there a decision on, regarding building department, adding support? And that was the discussion between, building department, town planner, and sharing that. So that's not been
I
finalized
haven't
yet.
finalized, but there are enough dollars to do some rearranging if we decide to do that.
Okay, does that answer your question, Alex? I don't know if he's still here. No. Okay, it's not yet been decided, but there will be more support. Okay, and that's not really something that we can go too deeply in anyway right now, in terms of agenda. All right, Chuck?
Yep, I'm still here. You can hear me?
Oh, yes, sorry about that.
That's all right.
I think we're through the Pine Street for the timeframe, next steps following the traffic calming policy. You laid out in an email, Chuck.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, so I mean, I can go over at a high level, but ask me any questions. But since we last spoke, we have at least bid that project, and we're looking to award. Nate is on the call as well, but I don't think we've awarded the contract yet. So I think we're on schedule there. We did get permission from the planning board last week, so we have no more future issues or with the planning board. It's mostly just with yourselves and the contractor once we get a little bit further. But for the traffic calming aspects, like I said in my email, in March, we'll be putting out the speed trailers to get some more data for the kind of baseline condition before we do any work. After we get to there, in April, we will get the additional pedestrian crossing devices. Those were part of a grant that we got that will look at Pine and Pleasant intersection. So that's, kind of when I anticipate we'll get those and be able to get those installed. We're hoping to do the additional sidewalk that was kind of put in that the field project in May. That's kind of subject to the work that will be going on over on School Street. So, I'm going to have the contractor fit that in, around that work. And then we can, once we get that kind of construction done, we'll do the additional painting that I laid out, and then the field will be completed in July. So that's kind of, the immediate next steps. I did talk to Todd about making sure we're all set with the speed trailer to get that additional data next month, and we don't see any issues with that. So any other thoughts or questions, we're happy to look into it.
Questions?
This one, the follow-up data collection that is planned for August. And then you say you may elect to do it again in September, October.
Yep.
And then, this wasn't clear to me, when you'd be coming back to the select board. It says late fall, is that like November or sometime?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably realistic. So the additional follow-up collection was supposed to be like after the field is completed. So, that'll be in the July timeframe, like I said. So August, we'll do the additional follow-up with that work. The idea is, the conditions will have changed. That being said, the field isn't actually slated to be used officially in terms of, actual practices and organized events until the fall. So, it'll see heavier use in the fall. So that's why I'm saying maybe we'll elect to do additional data collection in September, October, when the field is kind of in use and people are now used to it.
Okay.
So that's the idea.
That makes sense. And I guess the only other question then would be, is there a plan to engage the bike and ped committee at all? Or, because I know they work on some of these topics and I'm just not sure if that's part of the plan or not.
So I also forwarded this email. I think they might have either been CC'd on it or I forwarded it to them after the fact. So they're aware that this is kind of, how we're going to be handling the construction and the additional stuff. I've had a pretty good dialogue with them on this stuff, as well as other areas of town. So I think, we'll be in touch with them. They're not bashful when it comes to offering input. So we will continue that and then go from there.
Don?
I'm pretty good. I'm fine, thanks. Thanks, Chuck, the update.
Brian?
Good.
Ann?
I'm good.
I thought it was a lot of information. It was very good. Thank you, Chuck. I'm all set as well for
All
now.
right.
Nate,
Thank
did
you.
Nate want? I'm sorry.
I was just saying thank you. Yeah, I have nothing else.
Okay, and did Nate want to chime in or y'all all set on that?
I think we're good. Yeah, just looking forward to getting the Pine Street project going.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. It makes it very easy when we get so much advanced information. Okay, next up, we have the chief, who's been very busy.
Very busy.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you, Nate. Thank you, Chuck. Right.
So we're here tonight for second quarter review updates. Again, it has been very busy.
Yeah.
Focus over the last few months certainly has been continues in the dispatch efforts, which continue to go smoothly despite some challenges with staffing these last couple of months. So that and budget and working on some emergency management preparedness. Chief was fortunate to be chosen to attend a national academy down in Florida on
That was huge.
preparedness for hurricane. And I think that'll benefit us going forward as we work with our neighbors and improve our preparedness plans. Because I think a storm is coming someday. Don't know when, but I'm afraid it's going to be one of these days.
Hopefully I'll be retired.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, but you'll still be in town with your.
Low area.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
Believe me, I know. The chief knows my plan for hurricane preparedness. It's got nothing to do with his. It's a case of beer and maybe a candle.
Again, this group has done very well. with this work. I very much appreciate his efforts, but open up to your questions and Chief, make a few comments first.
Yeah, I mean, I submitted the memo, so in the interest of time, I can read it if you guys want me to, if not,
No,
but.
thank you. We're all of us quite literate.
Yeah. So basically, as Greg said, the dispatch has taken pretty much all of our time in the transition. We've been working really well with the regional partners, and we're working on the construction of the safe lobbies with Nate from DPW and Chris Ryan. So you'll be seeing some new doors go in possibly next week, and then probably the total package will be completed maybe probably late May, early June. So we'll continue to staff the lobby until those those lobbies are operational. We're beginning to schedule our records management training, which begins on March 6th. Let's see, I got some news I didn't put in the memo. So at the end of January, we held a promotional process for the sergeant vacancy. We had two really exceptional candidates apply for the position. They are veteran officers, both homegrown residents of Manchester by the Sea, and they came within a point of each other.
Wow.
So I'm pleased to announce publicly today, and I sent a memo to Greg for his approval, and I've got that back, that Officer Jen Gilson will be promoted to sergeant come March 1st. So maybe at your next meeting, we could have a quick swearing in ceremony with the town clerk and her family, if if that's possible. So it's kind of historical too, because as you know, her dad was a 35 or 40-year veteran of the police department. She'll be the first female sergeant in the history of the town. So
Didn't he have the most?
years, yeah, 50
Yeah.
years served
Yeah.
as a police officer. Yeah. And we honored that just recently. And as Greg said, I went to the National Hurricane Center. That was some very interesting training. Made some good contacts with our regional partners from the Northeast. It basically gave me knowledge on how they forecast these hurricanes and how they prepare for them, and gave us access to what they call HurrEvac. So it's a software system that states have, that we can model storm surge, kind of predict wind probabilities. And the biggest thing is that we have a hurricane, we can advance our clearance time. So if we have to evacuate something, we can take the forecast, put it into the system, and it will show the storm surge and how long it's going to take us to evacuate certain areas of town before the storm would hit. So that's going to be a very useful tool moving forward. So with that, that's pretty much the other updates that I had.
And did you have a question about something?
Yeah. And this is kind of detail. I thought we had 3 full-time dispatchers.
Correct.
One went to regional dispatch and has been seconded back to us.
So he was a part-timer. One full-timer left for Raleigh. This part-timer he was part-timer, went to regional, and he's working for us now, but he'll be leaving March 1st when we make the transition.
Yeah, okay, so we had been saying that we would have the existing dispatchers cover the lobby until July 1st.
Mhm.
It sounds as if we're running short of people.
Yeah, so now, when we won't be dispatching officers, consider there as well.
Okay. We had a bonus program. Greg. Does anybody get a bonus?
That still needs to be worked out.
Because I thought it was contingent on, and we made an exception for the one who went to. Okay.
So, yeah, let me give you an update on that.
And there's been a great change, I think, in the attitude. And you were to be congratulated on that.
Thank you so much.
Just again, very tiny detail, maybe we could schedule a swearing in at the very beginning of our meeting.
Yeah, it'll only take a couple minutes.
Because I'd like to be able to have some more people there, including her and her family.
Yeah.
And I know it's hard for all of us to get together, and if you think you'd rather have all of us and whoever can get into our next meeting, that's fine.
Yeah.
But, yeah, make sure we do that at a time.
So when would be the next meeting?
3/6.
March sixth, and it's
Probably packed, right?
looking like a pretty big, yeah.
I mean, if we could do it in there and then, you guys could continue your meeting after we're done and we come in here and have a little reception or something.
That sounds great.
It's a good idea.
Nice.
So,
Will there be cake?
yes.
Not bad, Kate.
I had a question about something you had mentioned. First of all, thank you for the report and the comprehensive emergency management plan.
Mhm.
2 hours there,
Right.
huh?
Yeah, a couple hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
But-
Pete Clary helped me out, and I have to give props to our local coordinator, Matt, who's from MEMA, who was really kind of guiding us in the right direction. So it was good.
Excellent. And then the other, I wanted to ask you about, you had mentioned security cameras on the lower levels. Is that,
So we have security cameras on the low levels. I think it's in the best interest of the town to put some on the second floor. But I know, I've talking to Sergeant Newton, who is working with regional on our access control and all that stuff. There's a plan in place, I think, with Nate to put in
okay,
panic buttons in every office downstairs.
good idea. Okay. All right.
Does this include, the Seaside one? Does Seaside one have cameras?
No.
Is there money someplace where we could?
In the car.
And I don't think it'd be too expensive. But
We'll look into it.
We're gonna do it now.
Rain, yeah. Brian,
No, I'm good. I've been very happy with what I've seen.
John,
Yeah, I just want to congratulate the chief. It's great to get these quarterly updates.
Yeah.
Since this is the second one, I guess we've had, I believe, and because, we don't know all of the stuff that goes on, and I'm sure you're picking the highlights. I know that life is much more complex than what we can read in a couple of pages, but
Yeah.
it's been very informative, and I really congratulate you and your department in bringing everyone along to a higher level of performance.
Kathy,
I'll add my congratulations once again. The work that you've been doing over the past 6 months has been fantastic. Especially appreciative of the work on the dispatch, so crossing our fingers, good to go. Next week,
Let's
yeah.
get through March 1st.
Culture change again is still evident and it's sticking, so that's great to see. And I really like to see the expansion of your network. Right,
Mhm.
so the emergency preparedness is an example of that, but you're working beyond Manchester, which is really great. Question I have is, we've talked about succession planning.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right, and I have noticed that there's a certain member of the department who tags along
Yeah.
in some meetings, and that's good,
Mm-hmm.
to get somebody experience.
There's a couple officers or lieutenant and sergeant that brought to a couple meetings that you saw and.
Okay.
they're-
That was my question.
Mm.
I'm hopeful it's more than one.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
And are we starting to think about, the level below you as well?
Mhm.
Right?
Definitely on the radar.
Okay, good. Because the succession planning is really about creating opportunities and seeing if there's a fit. And it's not a guarantee of anything.
Yeah, right.
That's great. No, all good, thank you.
And my congratulations. It's been a very distinct change in the right direction. So thank you. All right. That's it. And I just wanted to say again, kudos to the department. There've been a number of exemplary responses to some situations that
And there's been some nice letters from residents praiseworthy of
Yeah.
some of the officers and their work.
And it seems we've made a lot of progress toward solving problems rather than.
putting fires out. We're putting fires. All right.
Thing.
That's a good.
Okay, all right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As well.
Mhm.
Okay, we want to go back to COLA or talk about this ZBA member? Let's go to that let's go to that number 9, ZBA member. Right. Okay.
So, Brian, you want
No, my intention after, when I was elected to the select board was to resign from the zoning board, but I went right smack dab in the middle of the 40B. And then when that wrapped up, then we got involved with something else, which took 5 months, but I wanted to see it through. And my intention then was also to step down after that. Upon further reflection, now that, one night a month at a site visit didn't seem overly onerous, especially given the fact that when I started talking about it, there were a couple of the members who were talking about resigning or stepping down. So in an effort to maintain some continuity, but without taking on too much responsibility, it's really good at that, not taking on responsibility. I thought it would be maybe in the best interest to, rather than resign, just to slide back into an alternate position like when I first started. That would move, I think Sean Zahn would move up into the a voting member at this point. I think he was first alternate. That still doesn't negate the fact that he's gonna have to start looking for a couple of members. I know that it was advertised. I believe it was advertised, and I've spoken to a couple of people about it. So that's basically all I want to do is I just don't want to have to commit to the third Wednesday or fourth Wednesday of the month. I figure when we change it out, only when required. And I'd still show up if I had nothing to do.
So is this appointed? So do we have to modify his appointment?
yes.
All right.
No, there was a question at that point when, because I was a sitting member of the zoning board before I got elected, that was okay, right? Because I wasn't appointing myself now.
So when is that time up?
Well, I've got a letter, I'll give it to you right now to get out. I think I'm probably on a year and a half as a full-time. As a voting member. I think 23 actually, I think I was reappointed. Rather 22, I think this past summer I was reappointed. Yeah. So it's 3 years, so it's 2000.
Okay.
Can I also make a suggestion to align with that? Because I think it's a great idea. I really think it makes sense to formally name Brian as the liaison between the select board and the ZBA.
Yeah.
I don't think I understand the reason for naming me originally because it was kind of together with the planning board. I just think it makes sense.
So do we need to?
Did I just take on responsibility?
do
Did we just,
do
wasn't that the
that?
whole idea here?
Do we
Accept his resignation.
Right, are we current at this point accepting resignation and then reappointing him as an alternate?
I guess there's a question of where are we with the other members, and I'm not up to speed on that as I sit here.
Actually, I'm just logging online here. zoning
Is this
board of
effective?
appeals.
When?
It would be effective as soon as we say yes. I can tell you the members, I can tell you the members
Yeah.
who I think, James Mitchell, for health reasons, is talking about stepping down. Okay, Catherine Howe, for personal reasons, was talking about stepping down.
Yeah.
Now, Catherine had also said that if it becomes a problem for the zoning board, she'd stick around longer, but it was her intention. I beat it to the punch, is what it amounted to. Okay,
I'm just wondering if we wait a couple months and do all this with the annual appointments.
Right, and I,
but that's fine.
okay,
I mean, we're talking, we don't have a meeting in February, first next meeting is March. April, May, no, there's a couple of months.
yeah, if you're amenable to that, I
Sure.
think it makes more sense to just.
I think we'll have a better sense of the lay of the land. Another month or so.
Okay.
You're already advertising for slots for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Otherwise, your alternate status may
I
become.
don't even go there, all right? No, I know that when I first think, but I had spoken to a couple different people who expressed some interest. And I've since, I've told them to apply online, I don't know if they have or not. So I'll follow up with that as well. Okay. No one's applying? Oh,
So we'll come back to that, Brian.
Yeah.
But I'm not
The table.
foreseeing difficulties. Yes, the table is still there for now. COLA,
So this is something unusual. We don't usually see this. This is from the Essex Regional Retirement System. We are a member of that system. All full-time employees participate in that system. And so special legislation was passed to allow the retirement systems throughout the state to have a larger COLA than what they normally do. They normally do up to 3%. Legislation was passed to allow one-time 5%, up to 5% increase. The Essex Regional has proposed that as the COLA, and it takes a vote of the members, the member towns and cities to approve that increase. So it's based on the base. The base is on, it's based on 16,000 tons in terms of that increase.
so this requires the majority or 2/3 of the 19, is it 19?
Correct.
Yeah. Have any of the other municipalities voted yet? Do we know?
Yes, a number of them have.
And
As far as I know, anyone who's voted has approved. I think I'm speaking correctly, unless there's been a recent change.
Where
So-
does the money come from? The state?
No,
It comes from our
Um,
budget?
the state, so it comes from the employees. And then the participating municipalities are paying in, making up for the unfunded liability. So in the early years of the retirement system, they were not collecting enough.
Right,
So
right.
the employees are not paying enough into it.
Right.
So there was a deficit. So we are paying into it to make up the deficit.
I guess what I'm saying is if we vote an increase, so we're gonna have to start paying more. And has FinCom taken a look at this?
They haven't. So it's likely, depending on how investments do, but it's likely to add a few years until the retirement liability is dealt with.
Would it make sense to have FinCom take a look at it? I mean, seems like a pretty big increase and I just,
So we can, yeah, we can we'll take a look at it next, at the next
and
week.
when do we need to,
I think it's by the middle of March, is it? Did we see
Yeah.
something like this, 17th or something like that, on the letter?
yeah, it says, retirement system notified of the results on or before April 1st. So we do need to,
April 1st. Yeah.
So we've been paying into this system for, well, trying to catch up for some time, and now
Mhm.
they moved the goalposts a little bit.
They moved the goalpost a little bit with this higher call. Yes.
Right, so I think I 2033 sticks in my mind. Is that what you had said?
Yes.
Now it's 2036 or something. I don't know.
That's good.
Okay,
Yeah, and once it's in, there's, if cost of living
Right, no,
goes down, this is it.
right.
It seems like a permanent solution for a temporary
Right,
problem,
Hmm.
which I'm not a big fan of, and
yes, so I would like to, I agree with Kathy, I'd like to hear from FinCom.
Yeah, let me see if I can hear from regional what their estimate is in terms of impact.
Any others? And
I'd like more information.
Yeah.
It makes.
Yeah.
It. I assume that this doesn't mean that there'll be 5% every year from here on. It's just this 5% is a step, and if inflation comes down, it would be, go back to something more aligned with.
will it, though, that's,
you're adding to the base.
You're
right?
adding to the
You're adding to
so
the
that
base.
doesn't go back.
What's a,
Once
tide
that's
is
done.
So what goes back is
The increase.
traditional, the increase will go back to the more traditional 2 to 2.5,
Mhm.
which is what is traditionally been. A little lower than that when inflation was.
Yeah.
So low.
So right now their ceiling is 3.
Yeah.
And that's what they've been working on, but now, of course, with the past year, they want that ceiling to be 5. And they'll immediately go to,
Yes.
It's retro.
to the
Yeah.
20 to July.
Yeah.
Yes, I saw
Yes.
that. And then maybe it goes down, but there's no history that that has happened, at least when it was at 3.
Well, they're not gonna go, they're not gonna lower the base, but
Right.
they'll revert back to the lower increases. No, I'm not trying to.
Yeah,
It's
okay,
still on the higher
Yeah.
base.
I understood,
So
understood.
it's- Yeah,
Well, inflation is unlikely to reverse itself, and we're not going into a deflationary period, which is what. So increasing the base. And the cost of milk is going to stay up.
So we do need to see some numbers, from finance.
And it'd be nice if the finance committee gave us their
Raise,
recommendation.
okay, so we will come back to COLA. And since that, we can want to do that on the 6th or the following one.
Probably the following.
Okay, so that's 20,
20th.
okay, so 320 will be that.
If you could by 3:20, or as soon as you can. Find out how the voting is going,
Yeah. No,
because
we
if it's already passed. We don't need it.
don't even need to bother.
Right.
Yes, yeah, that is a good point.
Next up, we have any liaison updates? All right, how about consent agenda?
There's one very small thing.
Yes.
I may have mentioned before, that. The school committee has agreed to take a vote on March 1st on how they're going, exactly what they want to do with the debt for the turf fields. And they weren't planning, their schedule didn't have them voting on that before we had to make a final decision. And they volunteered, they had an executive session coming up, and they volunteered to add a public session to that so that they could take a specific vote, and we would be making a decision based on their decision rather than what they probably were going to decide, which I thought was very cooperative.
Yeah. Good. Okay, any questions on the consent agenda? I did, actually, there was on one of the items, one of the applications. I didn't see the insurance. Do you know, Debbie, if because that would have been Cheryl.
we can make a contingent on. making-
That's okay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the condition that the special events insurance information be provided for all the events?
So moved.
Second.
Wow, nicely done, you guys.
Okay, moved by Kathy Bellata, seconded by John Brown for change up. Okay, roll call vote. Kathy Bellata.
Yes.
John Brown.
Yes.
Brian Solace.
Yes.
Ann Harrison.
Yes,
Becky Jake says yes. Now we're up to town administrator's report.
Okay, so, like I just indicated earlier, union negotiations are ongoing. We have a session tomorrow on Thursday. But as I say, my sense is that it's gonna be a little while before we have some agreement here. So certainly keep you posted, when I have a better sense of what the deal might look like, we'll convene an executive session. So it's basically FYI, stay tuned. As the chief indicated, going forward with the March 1st switchover in dispatch. We'll have regional staff in under which are meeting on the 6th to basically just give a quick overview of the services that they're providing and allows the public a chance to put some names to faces. And then also the center has agreed to hold some open house hours. And they're looking at March 22nd, doing a 10 to 12 in the morning. And then the second round from 5 to 7 in the evening.
So they'll be here in before our meeting starts on the 6th. We had
Oh.
talked about that.
Let me confirm that, but yes, I think that is
Okay, so
possible.
we might need to see what we can do then with Sergeant Gilson and the swearing in. I just want to make sure we get,
Coordinate space.
yeah. Sorry.
So that's the game plan there. Thirdly, the Skate by the Sea event is coming together nicely. Hats off to Tiffany and Tiffany Marletta and the people that she's been working with, putting a lot of hard work. So this will be over the next 2 weekends, March 3, 4, and 5. And then not this coming week, the following, March 3, 4, and 5, and then again on 10, 11, 12. Will be, I'm very curious to see this product.
Yeah.
This
I
stuff
mean,
looks like.
And it's not ice, it's a plastic product that you can skate on. I'm very curious to see what it's like and how it feels to skate on it. Regular skates, you don't need special skates.
okay, that was my question, because
Yeah,
some of them do require special.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
yeah, but my understanding is you can bring your ice skates or your hockey skates and you can skate on this.
Can I bring my chair to?
Milk crates here. You know.
So should be fun event. Tiffany's getting a lot of positive
Oh,
feedback.
yeah.
There'll be a fire pit going and roasting s'mores and some music in the bandstand.
That sounds wonderful.
And
Really nice.
the merchants are rolling out some special promotions that people can take advantage of as well. So
Mhm.
Nice.
we're hopeful that it becomes a new annual event.
I'll miss the first
That's
one.
the idea. So
Yeah,
so we'll see how that all goes. Hopefully it goes well.
excellent.
It looks like it might be getting some snow. I don't know. We'll see what happens with the weather. We'll see. We'll see. And finally, it's the season for putting in papers for running for elected offices. Deadline is March 28th. No one has taken out papers yet for the housing authority or the school committee. So just put a plug in to folks who might be listening or you know of folks.
Have those, do we ever take kind of larger space saying, we need you here, here? I mean, housing authority, welcoming committee, I know there are certain ones that
Right.
typically need more people.
Yeah, let me talk to Tiffany about, give this a little more oomph. So That's, those are the four things I wanted to update you on.
Excellent.
Good.
All right, any other comments, anything else? Yeah,
Something that came in late.
Yeah.
Was the report that, in fact, vehicles over 15 years old don't need and skip emissions.
I need to learn more about that. First I'd heard of that.
Yeah, there was a couple of different things that we're talking about. And exemptions over gross vehicle weight and stuff like that.
Right.
Doesn't apply to fire engines.
It does
I know it
apply. to
does.
that.
Well, that's,
Very good.
that's what we're gonna nail down.
Oh,
Wouldn't that be great?
that's a-
Yeah, I guess.
But the other-
yes and no.
Take a load off.
We could use a break. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
And someone had suggested getting in touch with Bruce Tarr. You know, trying to find another way, if there is another way to get around replacing a $500 vehicle.
Just drive the thing.
Right, well, yeah.
That's, but suggested by the fact that this question has come up.
Well, there's also federal grants out there, right? As far as the application wise,
There are, yes, yes.
explore those.
Does take time.
Yeah, well,
Well, so does buying a new one.
Yes, it does.
And you were exploring something with Essex.
Yes, so the chief initiated that discussion.
All right.
So, yes, see if that has legs.
I would expect that this conversation might come up during the town meeting, right? So will we have a more comprehensive
Yes,
discussion about vehicles, I guess is the way,
Mhm.
well, it'll come up under cap.
under capital, because when we talk to capital,
Yeah.
and on the sixth. And
Yes.
that- okay. good,
Okay.
thank you.
But you're right, it'll come up. Because we.
Well, I just want to make sure we understand going into town
Yes.
meeting, what we think the strategy is.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Anything else? May I have a motion to adjourn then?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
well, now he wakes up.
Second.
Moved by John Round and then with prompt, seconded by Kathy Bellata. Roll call vote. Ann Harrison.
Yes.
Brian Solomon.
Yeah.
John Round.
Yes.
Kathy Bellata.
Yes.
Becky Jake says yes, and thank you to everyone who attended this evening.
Yeah, tap, 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 tap.